The following AIB Presents contains adult content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Just 5 minutes from Midtown Atlanta high-rises and corporate headquarters is a cross-section of streets known as a host roll. It's where women, some of them as young as 11 or 12, turn tricks. Some to support a drug habit, others to afford something to eat, some because they know no other life. It's a place trolled by cars with suburban license plates, some with baby car seats in the back, with the occupants seeking another kind of fix: sex for pay.
But if we're gonna be around here waiting to catch the creepy guy in the park, we're gonna miss the mark.
It's a crisis in Atlanta known by its current acronym, DMST, for Domestic Minor Sex Trafficking.
Most of the kids that I run into that are out there are either runaways or throwaways. And when I speak of that, when I speak of throwaways, I mean children that are no longer wanted by their parents and are just dropped off or put out of their homes or what have you.
DMST stalks the streets, dwells in the back rooms of dance clubs, hides behind hotel and massage parlor doors, lurks on the internet, preying on kids sold and bought for sex.
Most of what they do is not the woman on the corner or readily available, it's the online ads. And even then, they're marketing them as 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds and dressing them up to look older.
In this AIB Presents, we explore the multi-pronged problem, one that is crying out for solutions.
If you think about the fact that they've been sold 8 to 10 times a night, for night after night, for months, sometimes years, that just defeats and almost kills their soul.
In Part 2, we consider those solutions, and in both, we hear extensively from people on the front lines.
Once you begin treating people like a product on any level, whether that is for use as in a strip club or using internet pornography, it's very difficult to tell people how they can and cannot consume that product.
We hear from individuals and organizations that rescue and rehabilitate trafficked teens, and from those reflecting on the factors that all too often contribute to the crime.
We cannot continue to call men who buy young girls Johns. We have to call them rapists, we have to call them traffickers, we have to call them exploiters, and we have to hold them accountable.
In both programs, some material may not be suitable for all audiences, even though the subject matter deals with protecting children.
What a trafficker is really a bully. He's using someone that's vulnerable, that he can put down emotionally, verbally, all kinds of ways, break their spirit so that he can make money off of her.
Numbers, disturbing numbers, begin to give shape to the hideous truths about the buying and selling of children for sex in Atlanta and Georgia. 12 to 14, the average age a girl is lured into being sold for sex.
They're treated like property or like animals. They'll refer to the areas where, if they have the girls working the streets, they'll refer to it as a track. And they really are treated as if they were animals or a commodity. It's unreal.
65%, the percentage of buyers from suburban Atlanta outside the perimeter who buy sex.
The demand is really coming from the more affluent neighborhoods. North of the perimeter is where 42% of the demand in a lot of the studies show that it's coming from, which is very difficult for people to understand, because that means that if that's the case, and then you apply that to the numbers that have been reported, then in some way you have to know someone that's doing this, because there's no way you can't. The numbers are too large.
80 to 90, the percentage of children bought and sold for sex who have been sexually abused.
We have a society that really looks the other way, even in the cases where it's exposed a child has been sexually abused or a child is being trafficked. There's a society and a sense of, there's just not that sense of repulse or activism that needs to take place to protect that victim. There seems to be more sympathy or more compassion almost for the perpetrator, and that's sad. And that sends a message to our children that we really don't care, and it really is okay for you to be sexually abused.
7. The number of years a girl is likely to stay alive after she enters the trade.
People are dying. Girls are dying. We're losing lives. And sometimes that's physically losing them, but emotionally losing them. They're just becoming shells.
300 to 500, the number of girls in Georgia under the age of 18 exploited for sex each month.
When I was 11 to 14 years old, I was end of elementary school and middle school. I was just even figuring what it was like to have a crush on a girl, much less imagining being that age and being forced to have sex 10 to 30 times a night with different adult men under somebody else's control. That's not childhood. That's not where a child should be. They should be having fun, playing with friends, struggling over their pre-algebra math problems, not worrying about what the next client's gonna be like. Are they gonna beat them? Are they gonna slap them? Are they gonna call them names? And that's not a reality that any child should have. And it's certainly not a label we should put on a child that they are a prostitute.
7,200, the number of men accounting for 8,700 paid sex acts with teenage females each month in Georgia, some 300 a day, some knowingly, some unknowingly.
When a girl decides to post an ad on Backpage, they can actually take a picture of themselves and just upload it from their iPhone, from their cell phone, from their computer. And there's really no idea of how many girls are underage until you kind of get in there and start doing an investigation and talking to the girl. You might be able to say that the girl's underage by looking at her picture and seeing that she looks really young. Sometimes they list the age as 18, and that might be a key that they're young, or less under the age of 18. But mostly it's just really, it's a lot of footwork. You got to get in there and just talk to the girls and just try to make that connection. A lot of the times these girls are runaways, and if they post an ad, they might have their picture on there, but it might be blurred, or their head might be cut off where you can't see their head, you'll just see the bottom part of their body. Or sometimes there might be two girls in the picture, and one girl you might see her face, but the other girl might be turned away. And sometimes that might be a cue that the girl's underage, or she's a runaway, or she's hiding something.
Even more numbers shed light on the enormous profits to be made. A new national report puts the underground commercial sex trade in Metro Atlanta at $290 million a year, ranking it number 1 in a study of 8 U.S. cities.
It is vast differences all over Atlanta. Since we work with immigrants and refugees, you see all different cultures. You see Latinos, you see people from the Middle East, from South Asia, Southeast Asia, Western Africa, Eastern, Western Europe, all over the world. They're in Atlanta. We have a major airport, an international airport. We have major interstates that makes it easy for people to come in and out of the city and go all over Metro Atlanta. And we have an extremely high number of strip clubs, and sexual industry is very large in Atlanta. Both types of trafficking. There's sex trafficking as well as labor trafficking, and there's a great number of both. You have people in Korean massage parlors, you have people in nail spas, you have people in brothels, as well as working in the restaurants you might like to eat, people working in hotels, on construction, on just picking crops in the fields that you might be buying at the grocery store. They are all over Atlanta.
Pimps, those who sell children for sex in Atlanta, make nearly $33,000 a week, according to that same study conducted by the Urban Institute's Justice Policy Center. Pimps who give the girls quotas.
During my engagement with the two teenagers that were dropped off in the English Avenue neighborhood. This youngest girl, which was 12 years old, I could tell that she had been out there doing that work for a while because of the language that she used with me. And I got more response from the 14-year-old as far as trying to find out why they were there, what they were doing. But the 12-year-old, her response to me was, "Dad, if you ain't buying no pussy, you need to step off so I can get my money. Because my daddy ain't gonna like it if I come up short," which was referring to her pimp. So I could tell just by the conversation and the jazzy mouth that she had been out there for a minute. Because she was hardcore. And that was one of the main reasons that I followed them around and just basically pushed them right out of the neighborhood, because I knew that if I didn't, do that there was a possibility that they were gonna end up with the wrong person in the neighborhood and come up dead somewhere in one of those abandoned houses in the neighborhood. Because that's a reality of what goes on in that world.
The study also found that Atlanta's sex trade takes place on the street and online, as well as in Latino brothels and massage parlors.
Say with the Latinos, there's cantinas, and that's essentially where it could be a restaurant during the day, the afternoon, and then at night it'll turn more into a nightclub. So the women will be there, and initially they will be forced to serve them drinks, laugh at their jokes, sit with them for several hours, and if the men want to pay extra, then they have a room in the back, or they can take the woman home for sexual services. In other cases, you have hostess bars with the Asian community, where it's essentially the same thing. The women, they'll come out, and the men will choose whatever woman that he wants for the night. And again, she'll go up and sing karaoke with him in the karaoke bars and just sit down and have drinks with him, and have to serve a certain amount of drinks a night. That's their quota. And then if he wants to pay extra again, he can take her to the back room or take her home.
Atlanta has long been known as a hub for sex trafficking in general, with the intersection of its north-south and east-west interstates, and as a venue for major sporting events and conventions. Demand drives the supply.
Well, it's hard to get involved in this issue in any aspect without at some point thinking about the demand, because all we'll ever be doing is rescuing and restoring. But if they're still coming down the pipeline, you really want to go upstream and say, how can we stop this at the source? And the source is demand. And so really, I think we have this concept that the average guy is this sick, perverted sociopath or sex addict who can't control himself, and it's a real small portion of the population. But in reality, the demand crosses all faith lines. It's married men, single men, young men, old men, married men, people with children, grandfathers, all professions. When we talk to women that we've rescued, they can list off a slew of people that even showed them like pictures of their family. And these are guys who are lonely or feeling rejected at home, or this is a coping mechanism they've developed for stress. And I don't say that in justification, but just to normalize it, that it's not just the guy that we all think we could look at and say, oh, he looks creepy. It could be your neighbor, it could be your family member. And I don't say that to make people paranoid, but that's just the reality.
Sometimes peers or loved ones have given them the message, it's okay to sell your body for stuff.
Most of the girls that we work with in that court, their response to me is, so you mean to tell me that because my mom said I'm having sex with him, get him to buy my books? That's prostitution? That's exploitation? But if I'm having sex and I'm not getting anything, I'm just a hoe. So if he's taking care of me and he feeds us and he buys stuff for my little brother but he's taking care of me and mom says that if I'm having sex and I'm laying down with him, he should be taking care of me. So we have to really change their mind about what exploitation is, and we don't care what your mama said. You're not supposed to be taking care of yourself at 14 years old.
We've had some cases of mothers who have sold their children directly. We have had cases of uncles who have sold their nieces directly. And when I say directly, it's, little girl, come, this is what you're going to do to make money for the house. We have had cases of mothers who indirectly will sell their daughters, as in, well, you know, we need some money in the house, and it's kind of that indirect language where the girl understands very clearly that well, I'm 14, I can't go get a job legally, and mom's saying that I need to earn my keep. So yeah, that definitely happens. And of course, when that happens, the trauma is even greater, because this is the person who you naturally have very much a bond and a tie to, and this is the person who's betraying you. And so it's when in those cases it's extremely difficult to work through it because it's their mother. So yeah.
Many times there's a link between sex trafficking and drug addiction.
In the world of narcotics and drugs, you have people that are being trafficked because people that's caught up in addiction, sometimes they traffic their own children to get drugs.
Some children are abducted by pimps, perhaps at bus stations. Some are drugged, photographed in compromising poses, then blackmailed. Others see no other options.
And most of these children that I come in contact with, they're doing, the ones in Midtown, for instance, they're doing what I call survival sex work, you know, to keep a roof over their head. Because there are not many children's shelters here in Atlanta. There are some organizations that take kids in, but a lot of times these kids have their own issues that they're dealing with. Whether it's addiction to drugs, mental health issues, a lot of these kids do have those things going on with them. And all of these things need to be addressed in a holistic way to help these children and help these women and the male hustlers and the transgender folks that are out there doing that work. Because most of the transgender folks I come into contact with, they can't get regular jobs because of the prejudice and the stigma that goes along with their life choices. And that forces them into survival sex work.
Even more insidious, many preteens and teens are slowly, methodically groomed.
Its desired end is to ensure that the girl will be loyal and to ensure that the girl that she'll always do what she is told. And so there are certain rules that we have seen published. And so basically the steps are the grooming process. They will be very nice to the girl. They will paint pictures with them, mental pictures of this, I'm going to be your knight in shining armor, I'm going to take care of you, and they will back that up with action. And so they will invest hundreds and hundreds of dollars in making sure that her hair looks nice, making sure that her nails are done, making sure that she's got nice clothing. They will take her out to eat. And they realize that if they will invest a couple $100s up front, they're going to make thousands and thousands of dollars off of this child. And so because she's young, they know that they can build on those dreams. Just some of the things that in general we love about children is that they're able to dream, and they believe that dreams come true, and they believe it in a way that's a lot more literal than adults do. And so these people will capitalize on that, and they take advantage of that. And so they'll build these dreams so that the girls will come out and truly believe, yes, this is my knight in shining armor. Yes, he does love me. Now, another thing I mentioned was separating them from everyone else. And that's not just with telling them, hey, it's me and you against the world. It's also literally isolating them from their families. Sometimes what they will do in order to keep the girl a victim but not have to pay for her housing is they will allow the girl to go back home. And this one, I remember when I first found out that they were doing that, I thought, wait, you went home every day and every day you went back to him? And what she began to explain to me was the way he isolated her was more within her mind. And it was a lot more powerful. And so she would go home every night and go to sleep. And as soon as he would call her, she would leave. There were some who would go on their way to school, and instead of going to school, they would go to the pimp. He had that much control. And so a lot of this isolation is just really helping them to believe, or forcing them to believe, no one else is going to take care of you like I'm going to take care of you. Now, if that doesn't work, they will resort to threats earlier on. Generally, the threats come later, but if that's what it takes, they'll use threats at the beginning. Oftentimes, our girls have younger sisters or younger brothers. And so a very common one is a pimp will tell a girl, you know, I saw your sister walking to school yesterday, and so if you won't do this, I'll just get her. She's only 7. She'll do what I say. And I'm sure you've seen how protective girls can be and boys can be of their younger siblings. And so in those cases, and actually in the case I'm thinking about of one girl I was talking to, that's what really roped her in at the beginning. She would do anything to protect her younger sibling.
With kids so vulnerable, advocates question the culture that appears to breed buyers and sellers or create the attitudes that contribute to exploitation.
We've got to kind of back up and look at our society and look at how many toxic sexual images a child receives and the messaging they get at a very young age of their sexuality, and that they have to be sexual and everything they see is sexual and their music is sexual and the advertising we bombard them with is sexual.
Part of the problem, say advocates, rests with adults who don't know how to address the subject of sex head on and their ignorance about the signs.
They make sure that the girls don't look other people in the eyes. They make sure to vilify the police. They set up rules, and they will often tell the girls that this is to protect you. They set up rules for who they can go to, or which clients, which customers to service, and which ones to stay away from, because they know that cops will sometimes come undercover. And so they teach the girls to run, and this is what you do, and this is how you get away, and this is what you do in the case of emergency. I'll take care of you. And the girls actually end up running from the people who want to rescue them, because oftentimes they don't know that the people who want to rescue them. And the truth is, oftentimes the people who are supposed to be rescuing them don't know that these girls are victims and not criminals. And so a lot of times the good guys end up making the problem worse, because they treat the girls as if they were criminals and not as if they were victims. So there are lots and lots of layers to controlling these young women. I wish I could say that it only fell in, that the fault could only be placed, or the blame could only be placed on the pimps and the Johns and the people who are buying and selling them. But unfortunately, we all play a part in that. And you know, some of us who sort of turn our heads and look away play our role in that as well. We had one little girl who came in, and she said she didn't want help. Now, she was 13. She did not want help. And when asked why, she said, "Nobody came looking for me. Why do you care now? I never saw my name on a milk carton. Nobody cared about me then. Why would anybody care now?" And so there's this idea, and I'm sure it happened several times, that perhaps she was out in public and people saw that maybe something wasn't quite right, and they just sort of turned their heads and looked away. But I think her story always reminds me that, kind of as they say in the North, see something, say something, that we really do play a part, and that we all have a big part to play in preventing or diminishing the control that pimps often have over our children.
And those who work with the issue of DMST day in and day out say sometimes they get discouraged by public ignorance, apathy, detachment.
We all have been a teenager that are listening right now, and we know how vulnerable we were. It could have been us. And so in a weird way, it makes us want to separate. Like, I don't want to go there, could have been me. Or it's too ugly, I don't want to get involved. And I'll tell you, it is ugly. It's messy. It is really messy. It is hard work.
The issue of sex and sexual abuse is ignored in our homes. Most people are very uncomfortable with the topic. They're very uncomfortable with their own sexuality. So how do they sit down and express to their children? Perhaps they've made mistakes. Perhaps they had sex out of marriage, sex in a context that they don't feel like they could share or explain, so they have their own hidden embarrassment maybe, or maybe they have sexual abuse that they've not addressed or they've not disclosed, which is very painful. So the whole issue of sitting down and discussing with the child the issue of sex and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate and boundaries is very uncomfortable, so therefore parents aren't having those conversations.
I can't help it because no matter how much I do this work, and I've been doing this for almost 7 years now, there's still a person, when you meet them, they have no clue. There's still a person, when you meet them, they go, oh, that's only over there in Thailand. And you are floored that with all the work that we've done, where you been living? But the point is, we have a big, big world that we live in. It's a big state, and it's almost like the new car. Until you buy yours and drive off the lot, you never see it anywhere. And then once you drive off, you see them everywhere. That's what I tell people that trafficking is like. Is until you're educated, you just kind of don't know. You can't really beat yourself up for it. But once you're educated, you'll see signs and vulnerability all around you. And do you know what to do? Do you know how to make an anonymous tip? Do you know what you're looking at? Have you been taught about judgment and looking past what you think you know about a person to see that you're judging this woman? But if you take off your judgmental glasses and you take off that hair, you take off that makeup, you take off that attitude, you take off that tough exterior, you have a 14-year-old girl who's wondering, why wasn't I taken care of? Who's wondering, how is this my life? This is just my life.
We got a whole generation of children that we could possibly lose just to the stuff that goes on out in the streets. And until we wake up as a country and realize this, we're doing it to ourselves. We're shooting our own selves in the foot by not taking action.
There is the National Anti-Trafficking Hotline, and the number is 1-888-373-7888. You can call that number. You can make an anonymous report. You don't have to be sure in order to call the number. You can call the number and say, hey, this is what I see. I'm not sure if this person is being trafficked or not, but this is what I see, and I want you to know that.
The following AIB Presents contains adult content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
It is a form of modern-day slavery. Children bought and sold for sex every day in Georgia.
It's so violent. It's so ugly. We don't believe that humans could do this to each other.
300 to 500 preteen and teenage girls bought and sold in Georgia each month. The average age 12 to 14. The numbers for boys unclear, but likely comparable.
People are finally starting to understand that it doesn't just happen out in Africa or in some foreign country. It's going on here in Atlanta and all over the United States, and there's no denying it.
It is fed by industries, say advocates, that contribute to a mindset that tolerates it.
I think when you look at specifically pornography and strip clubs, you're looking at really the epitome of that devaluing, where all the human worth is what it does for me.
And it's nursed in a culture that all but supports it.
Why are we so shocked that our young boys think this way? If we look at what's on television, if we look at what's in the hip hop